The Elite Intergalactic Academy on Station X-227 prided itself on being the most prestigious educational institution in the Orion arm of the Milky Way. With its gleaming quantum glass walls and gravity-defying architecture, it looked exactly like what would happen if you gave a 5-year-old unlimited cosmic resources and told them to design a space station, which, coincidentally, was exactly what had happened. Zex'thor, the only human exchange student in the Academy's 300-year history, stood at his locker, watching the daily parade of alien life forms float, slither, and occasionally phase through the corridors. He'd chosen the name Zex'thor himself mainly because his actual Earth name made his classmates' translation implants smoke. After 3 months of causing 7 language processor meltdowns, he'd given up and picked something that sounded appropriately spacey. His locker neighbor, a gelatinous blob named Blurp Blurp, which roughly translated to Steve in English, though Zex'thor never had the heart to tell them, wobbled cheerfully as they absorbed their textbooks through osmosis. Blurp Blurp species, the Osmosians, were famous for their ability to learn by literally dissolving and absorbing information. Unfortunately, this meant the Academy had to replace their textbooks every week, but hey, that's what unlimited cosmic resources were for. Across the hall, a group of crystalline beings from the Andromeda Galaxy sparkled in the artificial sunlight, their faceted bodies creating impromptu disco effects that made passing photosensitive students dive for cover. They were discussing the latest quantum physics exam, their voices creating harmonics that shattered 3 drinking fountains and 1 unfortunate student's confidence. The Hive Mind Collective of Class 3B buzzed past, all 12 members perfectly synchronized in their hoverwalking, which would have been impressive if they weren't all trying to scratch the same itch at the same time. They'd gotten stuck in a feedback loop last week and spent 3 hours walking into the same wall. The school counselor was still trying to figure out if that counted as 1 detention or 12. Zex'thor checked his schedule on his holocomputer, which was really just a regular tablet computer he'd covered in glow-in-the-dark stickers. The aliens thought it was cutting-edge Earth technology, and he hadn't bothered to correct them. Besides, the stickers were holographic, so technically he wasn't lying. Next up was Xenobiology class with Professor Xylophone, no relation to the musical instrument, though they did make pleasant tinkling sounds when agitated. The professor had promised a special presentation today, something about Earth wildlife. Zex'thor had a feeling this was going to be interesting, especially since the last time Earth came up in class, his description of a platypus had caused 3 students to file for psychological counseling. As he made his way to class, dodging a group of levitating philosophers who were having an existential crisis mid-air, Zex'thor couldn't help but grin. Sure, being the only human in an intergalactic academy had its challenges, but at least it was never boring. Although he did wish someone would explain to the cafeteria staff that humans couldn't actually photosynthesize their lunch. Professor Xylophone's tentacles waved excitedly as they manipulated the holographic display at the front of the classroom. The display itself was acting up again, occasionally showing random clips from what appeared to be an intergalactic cooking show instead of the intended educational content. Nobody minded, though. Last week's accidental broadcast of how to properly season a gas giant had been surprisingly informative. "Today, class," the professor chimed melodiously, their crystalline structure vibrating with enthusiasm, "we will explore one of the most fascinating planets in the galaxy, Earth." They paused for dramatic effect, which was somewhat ruined by the hologram suddenly showing a recipe for quantum-baked neutron cookies. Zex'thor slumped lower in his seat as 37 pairs of eyes and several other sensory organs turned to stare at him. His desk neighbor, a young atmospheric being named Cloudy, literally condensed with excitement, forming a small rain cloud that dampened Zex'thor's notebooks. "Now, we've all heard the rumors about Earth's wildlife," Professor Xylophone continued, finally managing to display the correct presentation. "But today we'll be focusing on one particular species that exemplifies the fascinating brutality of Terran fauna." The hologram flickered and stabilized, showing a massive, grey-skinned creature wallowing in muddy water. Several students instinctively activated their defensive shields. "This," announced the professor with a flourish that sent pleasant wind chime noises through the room, "is a hippopotamus amphibius." The class collectively leaned forward, except for the gravity-defiant students who leaned backward because they did everything in reverse out of principle. According to our research, Professor Xylophone continued, this creature is responsible for approximately 500 human deaths per year in their native habitat. And yet, they paused again, this time achieving the desired dramatic effect. Humans classify it as an herbivore. The classroom erupted in chaos. A student from the silicon-based lifeforms faction began literally glitching. The hive mind collective started arguing with itself, which was always awkward to watch. Blurp, Blurp became so agitated they accidentally absorbed half their desk. But Professor, called out Nexus 7, a quantum intelligence student who took pride in asking the most obvious questions, if it's an herbivore, why does it terminate so many humans? Excellent question. Professor Xylophone's crystal structure rainbow shifted with pleasure. Zex'thor, perhaps you could enlighten us? Zex'thor, who had been trying to become one with his chair, a feat actually possible in this classroom thanks to some questionable quantum mechanics, cleared his throat. Well, you see, hippos are very territorial and aggressive. They're not hunting humans for food, they're just really, really grumpy. The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear a photon drop. Then Cloudy literally reigned in terror. You mean, squeaked a normally stoic plasma entity, their energy field flickering erratically, that Earth has creatures that kill not for sustenance, not for defense, but because they're in a bad mood? Well, when you put it that way, Zex'thor started, but was interrupted by the emergency containment shields automatically activating around several hyperventilating students. Professor Xylophone's attempt to restore order was hampered by their own excitement, causing them to play an entire symphony of wind chime sounds. The hologram, sensing the room's chaos, helpfully switched to displaying top 10 relaxation techniques for multi-dimensional beings. As the classroom descended into further pandemonium, with some students frantically calculating their odds of encountering a hippopotamus in deep space, 0, but panic isn't known for its mathematical accuracy, Zex'thor realized this was only the beginning. He hadn't even mentioned mosquitoes yet. News about the hippopotamus spread through the Elite Intergalactic Academy faster than a quantum hiccup in a probability drive. By lunchtime, the school's data network had registered an unprecedented surge in searches about Earth's wildlife, causing the AI librarian to develop a nervous twitch in its holographic projection. The cafeteria, usually a model of interspecies harmony if you ignored the occasional plasma discharge from someone forgetting to ground themselves before handling the silverware, had transformed into a makeshift research center. Students huddled around their devices, each new discovery eliciting gasps, screams, and in one case, spontaneous mitosis. Did you know, announced Nexus 7 to their lunch table, their quantum processors whirring audibly, that Earth has something called a box jellyfish that can kill a human in under 3 minutes? The table's occupants immediately levitated several inches higher despite only 2 of them actually having levitation abilities. Blurp Blurp, who had been stress-absorbing their way through their 5th lunch tray, burbled nervously. But surely the hippopotamus remains the apex predator of their world. Actually, chimed in a member of the Hive Mind Collective, all 12 of them speaking in perfect unison. They'd been practicing. According to these statistics, mosquitoes cause the most human deaths annually. What? The collective shriek caused all the quantum glass windows to vibrate sympathetically. You mean they have flying death creatures? Zex'thor, attempting to enjoy his synthesized space burger, which tasted suspiciously like mathematical equations, found himself at the center of an ever-growing crowd of panicked aliens. The crystalline beings had turned such a pale shade of transparent that they were practically invisible, which led to 3 unfortunate collision incidents. But how do humans survive? Demanded Cloudy, who had become so agitated they were now producing small bolts of lightning. The cafeteria's weather control system was having a meltdown trying to compensate. We just do, Zex'thor offered helpfully, which turned out to be exactly the wrong thing to say. The cafeteria erupted into chaos. Someone had discovered Australia's wildlife statistics, and the resulting wave of panic caused the Psychic Students' Union to broadcast their terror across 3 decks of the station. The maintenance crew would later find a group of telepathic maintenance bots hiding in a supply closet, rocking back and forth and mumbling about spiders. "Attention all students," blared the cafeteria's AI announcement system, its voice cracking with static. "Please refrain from mass hysteria during lunch hours. Also, the special today is not actually made from recycled Starship parts." The Hive Mind Collective had begun compiling a spreadsheet of Earth's most dangerous creatures, which now stretched across 17-dimensional planes. They'd had to invent 3 new number systems just to categorize the various ways Australian wildlife could end you. "But wait," called out a silicon-based student, their crystalline structure clinking nervously. "If Earth has all these deadly creatures, what does that make humans?" The cafeteria fell silent as the implications sank in. Several students began frantically recalculating their threat assessment algorithms. "You mean," whispered Nexus 7, their processors nearly overheating, "humans evolved on a planet with hippopotamuses, mosquitoes, and something called a honey badger, and they became the dominant species." The silence deepened. Someone dropped a quantum spork, and its clatter echoed like a supernova in a library. Zex'thor, feeling he should say something, cleared his throat. "Well, we also have dogs. They're pretty nice." A brave student quickly looked up dogs on their datapad. "It says here they descended from wolves, apex predators that humans domesticated for companionship." The cafeteria's artificial gravity hiccuped as several hundred alien students simultaneously tried to process this information. The atmospheric beings had become so pale they were practically stratospheric. "They took one of their planet's predators," summarized a thoroughly traumatized quantum intelligence student, "and made it their friend." The school's emergency containment protocols activated automatically as the collective realization triggered a wave of panic strong enough to register on the station's sensors. The cafeteria's AI, giving up all pretense of maintaining order, began playing soothing whale songs which only made things worse once someone looked up what a whale was. In the ensuing chaos, 3 photosynthetic students tried to disguise themselves as potted plants. The entire Psychic Students' Union had to be treated for second-hand anxiety, and the cafeteria's weather control system finally gave up and produced a localized hurricane of comfort food. Zex'thor watched as his alien classmates grappled with the reality of Earth's ecosystem, wondering if he should mention that humans sometimes kept venomous snakes as pets. Deciding against it, he quietly finished his space burger, which had somehow started tasting like existential dread, with a side of quantum uncertainty. The Academy's Conference Room B, Conference Room A, had been temporarily quarantined after a failed attempt to simulate Earth's food chain holographically, was packed with worried faculty members. Professor Xylophone's crystal structure had taken on a concerned shade of mauve, while the Dean of Xeno Studies, a massive gas-based being named Dr. Whoosh, floated anxiously near the ceiling. "Now then, Zex'thor," Dr. Whoosh began, their gaseous forms swirling with concern. "Perhaps you could explain your planet's wildlife hierarchy in terms we can understand." Zex'thor stood at the front of the room, beside a holographic display that kept trying to be helpful by showing random Earth animals. Currently, it was stuck on a loop between a platypus and a giraffe, which wasn't helping his credibility. "Well," he began, "Earth's ecosystem is actually quite balanced. You see, we have predators and prey, herbivores and carnivores." "Like the hippopotamus," interrupted Professor Quantum Physics, who had been stress calculating the probability of encountering Earth wildlife in deep space for the past hour. "No, well, yes, but not exactly," Zex'thor tried to explain. "Hippos are herbivores. They eat plants. They're just territorial." "So they kill for sport?" asked the head of psychological studies, a telepathic entity who was already drafting a research paper titled "The Psychological Implications of Evolving on a Death World." No, they're defensive. Look, let me show you a simple food chain." Zex'thor approached the holographic display, which helpfully switched to showing a documentary about penguins. After several attempts to override the display's helpful suggestions, Zex'thor managed to draw a basic Earth food chain. The faculty stared at it with a mixture of horror and fascination, like watching a supernova up close but with better safety protocols. You see, it starts with plants at the bottom, then herbivores like rabbits, then predators like wolves. "Wolves?" squeaked the mathematics professor, their equations beginning to shake. "The creatures you turned into companions." "Yes, but that's not the point. The point is..." "And where do hippopotamuses fit into this hierarchy?" demanded Dr. Whoosh, their gaseous form condensing with concern. They're herbivores, like I said, they eat plants. But they kill more efficiently than your predators. No, they just... The emergency broadcast system suddenly crackled to life. Attention all faculty and students. Due to recent revelations about Earth's ecosystem, the Academy's Threat Assessment Committee has upgraded Earth from mostly harmless to what in the name of quantum mechanics is going on there. This announcement triggered a fresh wave of panic. The biology department had already begun drafting a proposal to reclassify Earth as a Class X death world, while the physics department was trying to calculate if they could safely contain the entire planet in a quantum bubble just to be safe. Perhaps, suggested Professor Xylophone, their chimes taking on a nervous tinkle, we should discuss the psychological adaptations that allow humans to survive in such an environment. We're really not that special, Zex'thor protested. We just developed tools and... Tools, the collective gasp from the faculty caused 3 light fixtures to shatter. You mean you created artificial extensions of your abilities to compete with these creatures? The mathematics professor was now drawing complex probability matrices on the walls, trying to calculate the statistical likelihood of human survival given their environmental conditions. They'd already filled 2 rooms and were working their way down the corridor. And you said earlier that humans keep venomous creatures as pets, added the chemistry professor, who had been quietly synthesizing anti-anxiety compounds in the corner. Well, some people do, but... The Dean of Xenostudies had heard enough. Their gaseous form expanded to fill the upper half of the room as they activated the Academy-wide communication system. Emergency assembly in the main hall. All students and faculty must attend, bring protective equipment. As the faculty filed out, Zex'thor could hear them muttering among themselves. The rumor mill was already working overtime. He caught snippets about humans being secret apex predators, Earth being a testing ground for some cosmic horror's evolutionary experiments, and one particularly creative theory about humans being an ancient warrior race that chose to hide their true nature behind a veneer of civilization. The main hall, designed to hold the entire Academy's population, was packed within minutes. The atmospheric beings clustered near the ceiling, forming worried cloud patterns. The Hive Mind Collective had split into their individual components due to stress and were now having 12 separate anxiety attacks. Blurp, blurp, had absorbed so many stress balls they were beginning to look spherical. Dr. Whoosh floated to the podium, their gaseous form trying to maintain a professional appearance despite occasionally forming the shape of various Earth predators. Students and faculty of the Elite Intergalactic Academy, we are here to address the recent discoveries about our exchange students' home world. A nervous ripple went through the crowd. Several crystalline beings began stress refracting. According to our latest analysis, the Dean continued, Earth appears to be a planet where herbivores are deadlier than predators. Predators become companions, and the dominant species evolved without natural defensive capabilities in an environment that seems designed by a committee of cosmic horror enthusiasts. Zex'thor tried to interrupt, but his protests were drowned out by the sound of several hundred alien students updating their personal threat assessment databases. Furthermore, Dr. Whoosh expanded dramatically, humans have not only survived in this environment, but have developed the ability to travel through space, potentially bringing their world's evolutionary parameters to other planets. The assembly erupted into chaos. The quantum physics students began calculating the possibility of alternative universes where Earth's wildlife made sense. The biology department demanded immediate funding for a research project titled Understanding Human Survival Mechanisms, How in the Universe. As Zex'thor watched the pandemonium unfold, he realized that trying to explain Earth's wildlife to a bunch of aliens might have been more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The holographic display, still trying to be helpful, had started showing clips of cat videos, which only made things worse once someone realized humans kept miniature predators in their homes for emotional support. The Academy's Science Division had commandeered Laboratory Complex C for their emergency investigation. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing Earth wildlife statistics, human physiological data, and an inexplicable loop of something called cat fails that nobody could figure out how to turn off. Dr. Particle, the head of the investigation team, hovered near a complex diagram comparing Earth's wildlife with known apex predators from other worlds. Their energy-based form crackled with confusion. According to our analysis, they announced to the assembled team, Earth's most dangerous herbivore, the hippopotamus, could theoretically defeat the crystal wolves of Nexus 6, the plasma panthers of Gamma Centauri, and possibly even give the infamous quantum tigers of Zeta Reticuli a run for their money. The research team, consisting of the brightest minds from 17 different species, collectively shuddered. A young quantum intelligence analyst was frantically cross-referencing Earth's wildlife database with their own planetary defense systems. But that's not even the most disturbing part, continued Dr. Particle, their energy field fluctuating wildly. Observe this footage of human recreational activities. The main screen displayed humans participating in various sports and outdoor activities. The research team watched in horror as humans willingly jumped out of perfectly functional aircraft, scaled sheer cliff faces without anti-gravity units, and dove into bodies of water that could potentially contain hippopotamuses. Are they malfunctioning? Asked Professor Logicgate, their silicon-based circuits nearly frying with confusion. Negative, responded the medical analysis AI. These appear to be voluntary activities conducted for something humans call fun. The term fun had to be added to the Xenological dictionary with a warning label. Blurp Blurp, who had been invited to join the research team due to their close proximity to Zex'thor's locker, wobbled nervously. But how does this compare to our own world's survival challenges? Dr. Particle pulled up a new holographic display. On Crystallis Prime, the most dangerous creature is the diamond-backed stalker, which hunts by perfectly logical patterns and can be avoided by solving simple quantum equations. On Gaseous 6, the Nebula Wraith is considered apex predator, but only feeds once per solar cycle and announces its presence with a mathematical symphony. Meanwhile, interrupted Professor Logicgate, Earth has creatures that kill because they're grumpy, insects that spread microscopic death, and something called a goose that appears to run entirely on spite. The research team had compiled a comprehensive comparison chart. Average planetary apex predator hunts according to logical patterns, kills for sustenance, has clear warning signals, can be deterred by technology. Earth wildlife, chaos incarnate, kills for various reasons, including just because. Warning signals may be looking cute, actively breaks technology. But the most fascinating aspect, Dr. Particle continued, their energy form taking on the shape of a question mark, is human resilience in this environment. The screens filled with data about human adaptability, the medical analysis AI had to take a moment to recalibrate its probability circuits. Humans have no natural armor, no significant defensive capabilities, and yet, Dr. Particle paused for dramatic effect, causing several power fluctuations. They've not only survived, but have achieved space travel while coexisting with these creatures. Professor Logicgate's circuits were smoking slightly. According to these calculations, humans have turned several predator species into companions, regularly interact with venomous creatures for research, and some even rehabilitate injured, dangerous wildlife. The psychological implications are staggering, added Dr. Neural Network, the team's xenopsychologist. They appear to have developed a unique combination of survival instincts and complete disregard for self-preservation. The research team spent several hours documenting cases of human resilience, each example more bewildering than the last. They discovered humans who studied venomous snakes up close, photographed dangerous predators for entertainment, and willingly approached hippopotamuses for research purposes. Perhaps, suggested Blurp Blurp, who had been stress-absorbing research papers all afternoon, we should reclassify humans themselves. The suggestion sent ripples through the laboratory. The implications were simultaneously terrifying and awe-inspiring. Any species that could evolve on such a planet and achieve spacefaring status had to be either incredibly resilient or slightly insane. The research team was beginning to suspect both. Dr. Particle's final report to the Academy Board contained an unprecedented recommendation, upgrading human classification from generally harmless bipedal mammals to extremely resilient potential apex species. The addendum noted, any species that can turn predators into companions and survive on a planet where even the herbivores are deadly must be treated with both extreme respect and cautious terror. The report was sealed with a warning label that read, reading this document may cause existential crisis in silicon-based life forms and spontaneous phase shifting in quantum entities. A week after the great hippopotamus revelation, as it would come to be known in Academy history, the atmosphere at the Elite Intergalactic Academy had shifted dramatically. The initial panic had evolved into a sort of terrified respect, particularly after the Xenobiology department's final presentation on Earth's ecosystem. Zex'thor found himself upgraded from curious alien specimen to survivor of an apex death world. Students who had previously avoided him now crowded around during lunch, pestering him with questions about Earth's wildlife. The Hive Mind Collective had even dedicated 3 of their members to full-time Earth studies, although they refused to process any information about Australian wildlife after hours. "So you're telling us," Nexus 7 asked during lunch, their quantum processors humming with fascination, "that despite having all these deadly creatures, humans deliberately set aside land to protect them?" "Yeah, we call them wildlife preserves," Zex'thor explained, watching as his alien classmates tried to process this information. Blup Blup had become so engrossed in the conversation, they accidentally absorbed their chair. "But why?" the crystalline being sparkled with confusion. "Why preserve creatures that could potentially terminate your existence?" Before Zex'thor could answer, Professor Xylophone chimed in from a nearby table. The faculty had taken to joining student lunch discussions, partly out of scientific curiosity and partly to prevent any more cafeteria-wide panic attacks. "I believe," the professor resonated thoughtfully, "we've been looking at this all wrong. Earth's dangerous wildlife isn't a bug, it's a feature." The cafeteria fell silent, except for the quantum sporks that had developed anxiety-induced vibrations. "Think about it," Professor Xylophone continued, their crystal structure shifting through excited color patterns. "Humans didn't just survive their world. They learned to appreciate and preserve its diversity, even the parts that could theoretically eat them. This revelation caused a wave of enlightenment so powerful, it temporarily disrupted the station's gravity generators. Several levitating philosophers, who had been floating near the ceiling contemplating the nature of human existence, suddenly found themselves having to contemplate the nature of falling instead. The Academy Board, in an unprecedented move, revised their entire curriculum to include mandatory Earth Studies classes. The course description came with a warning label. Side effects may include existential crisis, spontaneous evolution of survival instincts, and a newfound respect for creatures that look like floating river potatoes but can bite a hovercar in half. Even the Academy's recruitment policy changed. The admission requirements now included a new section. Must be prepared to study alongside species that evolved on a planet where even the cute things might kill you. The most unexpected outcome, however, came from the Intergalactic University Sports Federation. After reviewing the research about Earth's wildlife and human adaptability, they unanimously voted to handicap all human participants in competitive sports. As the Federation president explained, any species that plays with apex predators for fun clearly has an unfair advantage in regular sports. But the final twist came during the Academy's end-of-term ceremony. Dr. Whoosh, still maintaining a respectful distance from Zex'thor, made a groundbreaking announcement. "In light of our recent understanding of Earth's unique ecosystem," the dean's gaseous form swirled dramatically, "we are pleased to announce a new exchange program. Selected students will have the opportunity to visit Earth's wildlife preserves under heavily shielded conditions." The announcement was met with a mixture of terror and excitement. The application system crashed within minutes, overwhelmed by students either applying for the program or filing formal requests to be as far from it as possible. As Zex'thor watched his classmates alternately panicking and planning their Earth expeditions, he couldn't help but smile. He'd finally managed to explain Earth's wildlife to his alien classmates, even if the explanation had caused 3 nervous breakdowns, 2 evolutionary leaps, and 1 case of spontaneous molecular reorganization. Then Cloudy, who had been unusually quiet, floated over with a worrying question. "Hey, Zex'thor, what's this Earth creature called a platypus that keeps coming up in my research? The database says it's venomous, lays eggs, produces milk, and looks like it was assembled from spare parts." The sound of collective alien minds breaking echoed through the station as Zex'thor realized he'd have to start all over again. Meanwhile, the Academy's AI quietly updated Earth's classification one final time to reality check. Yes, they're serious about all this.